All right, you guys ready to roll?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so first off, since we have kind of a smaller class today, I would love to find out if anybody has anything in particular that you want to learn, or do you just want me to kind of go through how to use or how I've always used Trendgraphix and how to pull market numbers?
That would be good. The one thing I'm struggling with, and I don't know if you get this on Trendgraphix or not, is how do you do more recent statistics? Like, you know, just this week, is that possible? Or the last few days? I don't know how to do that.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else? Oliver, I know you posted, and that's probably why you're here, because I responded and told you to come to this class. But
yeah, thanks. Let me decline this. Yeah, I was having a lot of conversations this morning with people in my pipeline, and they're really on the fence, like moving forward. So I just wanted to come from a place of contribution and talk to them about, like, you know, March statistics, because I know March was the beginning of all this, but then when I went on the MLS and looked at the statistics today for March, like they still weren't up. So I know that we talked about Trendgraphix. I never used it. That's why I'm curious how to use it.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think there's two things that we will want to look into. One of them, I posted a Loom video, and I'll be happy to send it to you guys. Robert, I think you were one of the people that had requested it from me on how to look at the stats like that are within the last 7 days even on the MLS. So I'll show you guys how to do that after this. But Trendgraphix, just to kind of give you a background. So what you're going to do is, so first of all, you're just going to go to Trendgraphix, and graphics is with an IX, not an ICS. So it's trendgraphix.com/login. And then our username is consultants, and I will go to KWC resources, this non-beautiful website that I created, but it does have all the information. It's quick and easy. All of your passwords are in here. If you guys haven't looked at this website, I put it in a few emails, but KWC resources, and it has our Trendgraphix password down here.
Yes.
And then also, just while we're on this, this had nothing to do with what I was going to talk about in this class, but I will point out that anytime I've done new things in here, like I have a link to the YouTube channel. When I do Loom recordings, I put them in here, so it goes to this additional website. So there's how to pull a market analysis and showing time, how to set up a Google Calendar event and Google Hangout. So it's like a screen record that I did that's voiced over. And then we don't have any event registration right now because obviously there's no events going on, but I've also got the earnest money guidelines in here with the process on how to do that, with some language down here. And then I also put the coronavirus language clause in here, and also the state and CDC guidance here. So anyways, just some different stuff going on. It's a great resource page. I just thought that we get a lot of the same questions over and over again. So if we could, you know, put everything in one place, that would be helpful. So anyways, our password for Trendgraphix, if you guys want to follow along, which would probably be the best way to learn, the username is consultants and the password is Keller1. So once we log in, let me get this out of the way. Okay. So once we log in, I don't know if my internet is slow or if there's a problem with Trendgraphix. Let's see. Are you guys seeing the range?
I see it.
Oh, it was in Broker Edge Light. Sorry. So you have to click on Facts and Trends Light. I think it usually automatically goes there, but I had been in Broker Edge last time, so sorry about that. All right, so just the quick thing. So the first thing that you're going to want to look at, so you can see this says for sale versus sold up here. So basically what this graph is showing us is the light green lines are the for sales, the dark green are the solds in each of these given months. So the standard, it goes back 15 months, and then the red line are the pendings or in contract. Okay. Now, obviously you see seasonality in this graph, right? Like it, however, one of the biggest things that I used this for when I was an agent was to just, this was the first thing I would talk about when I would go into a listing appointment, to just get the seller on the same page as me from a seasonality perspective. Because a lot of sellers don't understand the relationship between supply and demand, as basic as that is. And even if they do understand the concept of supply and demand, they don't really know how it applies to real estate. So just you having this conversation presents you as the expert almost immediately, and it gives you the facts to back it up. So right now, this is showing for sale, sold, and pended. If you click this arrow right here, you actually have a bunch of other options. My favorite one, I love data. So my favorite one is the one that shows the most amount of data. And so this one shows the for sale, sold, pending, and the new listings in each month. And so this is a very unique, or it's not unique, but it also helps to show the seller. I always like to use this in the spring to get people to list sooner, because you can see how the number of pendings is, like in March, goes up substantially, but the number of new listings in February is low. So I would talk about there being that sweet spot in early March where there were the fewest number of listings, but there were the most number of buyers. And obviously that's somewhat price range dependent, but you can see that a lot of people like to wait until May to list their house. And what I would tell people is, actually the data tells you that May is actually the worst time to list your house. It's not the worst time, but it's one of the worst times from a competition perspective, because that's the month of the year that you get the most number of new listings. And yet you only, so the new listings was from, like, if you compare it to April, for example, there were only 3,800 or 3,900 new listings. So there were 600 new listings in May compared to April, but there were only 190 new pendings. So what you're seeing is that the supply and demand is going more into the buyer's favor. And if you guys who have been in the business for a long time think about it, you know why you felt that way in the spring, how almost like it's fighting in March and April and early May, and then it seems to like break open, you know, at the end of May and in the beginning of June. Well, this graph is the reason why. So sometimes, depending on on the client, so if they're a high C personality, I might print off the whole market just to show them the general trends, or even maybe for yourself. And then the next thing I would do, like, let's say one of you guys throw out your most recent listing appointment in terms of the school district and price range.
Do Upper Arlington 350 price range.
Okay. So if I was in the 350 price range in UA, so a couple things I know about UA. So for those of you who are newer or have never sold there, 350 is like the bottom of the market in UA, basically. So I would probably do everything. So here's what I would do. I would go over to school district. That's the first and foremost thing. So I have two rules when I'm doing listing appointment prep. The first one is I would go to school district. The only time I wouldn't go to school district would be if I was in Columbus schools, and then I would go to zip code. Because obviously Columbus schools is not going to narrow your range down enough.
Why is there's like multiple Upper Arlington ones?
Yep, I'll show you in a second. Oh, did I pass it? I passed it already.
No, you haven't.
No, I haven't. I would, like, you're making me second guess my ability to do ABCs. You're okay. Looking ahead. So yeah, the reason why there's Upper Arlington is because there's Columbus City, Upper Arlington schools, and then Upper Arlington. But what you actually want is the Upper Arlington only, because
CS,
you want
okay.
all of it.
Okay.
But it breaks it down based on like basically every zip code and all of that stuff. But normally you're going to want the whole thing, just from a sample size, like
From a macro standpoint. Yeah.
In a district like Arlington. And then down here, depending on the price range, again, so in Arlington and 350, I might do 300 to 400.
Okay.
You know, if you're in a higher price point, you probably want to go to a larger range. And when you're in a lower price point, you probably want to go to a larger range. And then, so you select this. Now, the other thing I would do, especially in a place like Arlington, for example, for whatever reason, their condos there tend to be much lower priced.
That mine's a condo.
Yeah. It is a condo. Okay. Awesome. So if it's a condo, I might even go down to 250 then.
Okay.
Just because condos tend to be lower.
You're right. Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with because the condo fees are high and all kinds of other things. But so the default date range is always 15 months. Okay. But and that's what I would normally go with, but just know that you can go back actually as much as 6 years. Now, the thing that does, though, is it makes the graph a little bit more difficult to read. So depending on what kind of trend you're looking for, I would usually stick with the 15 months. It gives you a little bit before, you know, the previous information. And now one thing I will tell you is that normally this is already updated for March by now. So I'm not sure. Like, I know the MLS stats usually come out like not until like the 20th of the following month, but usually Trendgraphix is updated right away. So I'm not sure why there's a lag time, but normally you're going to get those March stats in here. Now you do have some of what they call today's stats in here, showing you kind of what's going on right now. Are you following me, Oliver?
Yeah, I kind of see today's stats over there, but these all say zero. Well, I haven't clicked on anything. I guess click show chart now.
So yeah, so now we're going to show chart, and that'll apply the new criteria that we gave. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can see what's happening. I'm trying to figure out though why they looked at 3-1. Oh, that's looking at March versus April. So, but what you're seeing though is there's definitely a trend. Now I see what you're saying, Oliver, from the perspective of like looking at the market right now. So we'll dig into that. Like I said, normally Trendgraphix is pretty updated, and I would suspect that within the next couple of days they'll be posting March. But you can see the difference between these 5 days basically in March versus April. I mean, there are more for sale. There were more new listings in March versus April. Solds were down, but pendings were up. And obviously this is a tight range. So you may want to like open up the price range a little bit in a situation like this, just to kind of see what the whole market is doing. But that's a pretty good sample size though, I would say, when you're looking at, having 20 listings. That's still a pretty good sample size. Are you guys following me on what I'm talking about here with today's stats, or did I just start rambling?
No, I followed that. I like that.
So it looks like it's very congruent to last year at this time. So it looks like in February last year, at least, it looks kind of like February, March of this year.
Yeah, actually.
Although March is down a little, so I see new listings are for sale. Wow, new listings is really down.
Hey Troy, this is a stupid question, but I'm a little confused about what that pended value means. Is that including what is sold? I don't really understand that pended value.
Yeah, that's the number of properties that were in contract. And I believe I would need to, here we go. I think this tells us exactly when. It represents the number of properties that went into the pending status for that month.
Okay, so so that could include what's on the sold bar on that chart, right?
It could.
Okay.
If it went into contract and closed in less than 30 days, it could. I would say that's not the norm that things close in less than 30 days, but it certainly happens.
Okay.
And
But
Troy,
often that would typically only happen on properties that went pending in the first week. So from a statistical perspective, it's largely irrelevant.
Okay.
hey Troy, this is Mary Chris. I
Yep.
have one question. I think it's covered up now, but I think under today's stats, is that
Mhm.
usually only a 5-day period, or is that just because it's not updated yet?
Let me see if I can change that, because I don't know if I can.
It might be a month-to-date stat, just might not have, because we're in the middle.
Not true, because we're the 6th now, or whatever the date.
Yeah,
I
we're in the
think-
middle of the day, so I think it's month-to-date.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I think it is. I think you're exactly right. I think it is month to date. So yeah, like I said, very soon. Let me see if it says it on here. If it says what date I don't think it does say in here what date, but I would suspect within the next day or two that they're going to update it for March. But this like market highlight thing just kind of shows you some quick talking points too. If you wanted some talking points, you just mouse over that little light bulb and it just kind of gives you a quick summary. So again, I always say that, especially as we've moved into this time, sellers and buyers, to Oliver's point, they're looking for people to be their economists, their local economist of choice. So I would say 2 months ago, people felt like, yeah, it matters kind of who your agent is, but in a shifting market, sellers and buyers are looking for the expert because it's a very uncertain time and they feel like somebody who really knows what they're talking about is going to be the person that they're going to hitch their wagon to because they're scared. They're fearful. They're afraid that they're going to buy too high. And then they're afraid like what happens if the market changes. And so the more confident you are and the more it's about facts versus opinion, the better off you're going to make your clients feel. Now, obviously, there's a difference between being, being confident and being decisive, meaning that you're telling them that you're guaranteeing exactly what's going to happen, because I can tell you, if you are, you're lying to them because none of us know. I was just on a leadership call and at the very end, he said, raise your hand if you've been through a 100-year pandemic and led through it before. And no one obviously raised their hand. So this is uncharted territory. And yet what I can tell you as being somebody that lived through the shift before is that we just have to do the best that we can do. And I commend you guys that are on this call, because what you're doing is educating yourself on how to be best prepared to understand the market of the past and how that's affecting the current market. And that's really all you can do. The other shift I will tell you, for those of you that didn't have your license during the downturn that happened before, and I don't know that any of us on this call, except for me, did, is you have to shift your mindset around doing market analysis from looking at the past to looking at what's happening today, meaning how many active listings are on the market right now and how many are in contract. And really the in contracts are the most history you really should be paying attention to, because frankly, what sold last week is a reflection of what the market was at the end of February or beginning of March, which was before all of this started.
Yeah, I think, I've had a bunch of these conversations today, and I think the only thing I tell my clients is it's like, look, I'm not an economist, so I can't dare tell you what the market does going forward. I just have to be able to tell you what the market's doing today. And if you want to make a decision based on what's doing today, we can have that conversation. But like going forward, I'm just honest with them. I don't want to make them, jump off the cliff or hold on based upon what we think might happen. It's just, I can only tell you in today's time what I'm seeing.
I agree. And I also, though, I would encourage you guys to leverage other resources. So go on CNBC, go on Bloomberg, and pull off what the Federal Reserve heads are putting out in articles and send those to your clients. And you can say, yeah, I'm not a professional economist, yet so-and-so wrote an article on CNBC, and here it is that said that they think the fourth quarter is going to be robust. Now, is that a guarantee that the fourth quarter is going to be robust? No. One thing I can tell you that's straight fact, though, right now, that has to be part of a conversation with any owner occupant or long-term hold investor, is that interest rates are at absolute historic lows right now. And if you see yourself living in a property for 5 to 10 years, especially 10 or more years, now is absolutely a fine time to buy. If you go look at the market in 2015 and compare it to what it was in 2005 and ignore the middle, it's fine. It's the only time, it's just like a stock when you buy it. A house is just like a stock. The only time it matters how much it's worth is the day you buy it and the day you sell it. And everything in between is just emotion, because the value of it, A, you can't peg completely because it's based on market desires, and B, it just doesn't matter. And so now when you're talking to an investor like short-term flippers, yeah, I'm not advising anybody to go flip a house right now because you're depending on something that's just completely, throw it at the wall and hope it sticks. But if you're willing to hold an investment property long-term, absolutely. It's a fantastic time. There's not been a better time. I mean, demand is down right now. I mean, I'm thinking anybody looking in the 350 to 600 plus range that's been looking at properties and been frustrated by the fact that, that they didn't want to be in a multiple offer situation. Now is the time. Now is the time. And so you can lock in low interest rates and no competition. You plan on living there for 10 years. I mean, if you want to wait till it's competitive again to be guaranteed, but no one can time the market exactly.
Yeah, I really like that. Conversation piece. And that's kind of what I've been telling, at least from the investment standpoint. I said, now's a great time to buy. Because you've got the interest rates where you want it. I said, if you're buying on location always holds value in the long term. And if there's upside to it, then long term, you stand a great chance right now to get in. It's opportunity lost if we wait because, we don't know what interest rates we're going to do, but we know they can't go much lower. And, so that is a good conversation piece.
Yeah, so I'll just jump through this, even though I wish that this had flipped over to March because the statistics I think would be a little bit more relevant. But here's the conversation I would have in a listing appointment. I would definitely, I really pay a little attention to current versus previous month because our business is so cyclical. What happened in February isn't really relevant to what's happening in April. So I'm, not looking, or even what happened at the beginning of March because of cycles. But what I do like to look at is current versus same month a year ago. And then also current versus same quarter a year ago can also be valuable.
Troy, can I ask a quick question
Yep.
before you move on? When you pulled this one for Oliver, are those all of the houses in Upper Arlington, or are those just the houses that are between 300 and 400? Or it looks like it's
They're between 60 and 400.
okay.
And actually, I would always, and I forgot to do this, I would always check whether it's single family
Yes.
or condo. Because
So
there's definitely a difference between those two.
is that how many condos are for sale in Upper
No,
Arlington?
I didn't select condo, so I'm
Oh.
going to do that right now.
Okay.
And another question would be, I mean, how often are you having the conversation like hyper local, meaning like maybe their school district versus what is the overall market doing? And maybe you have a conversation about both just to see kind of where trends are. But is that another conversation you have too, Troy?
Yeah, I would have a conversation about the overall market, and yet this is about as overall as I would typically go in my listing appointment, because the next step, so what I would do is I would say we're looking at a 30,000 foot view. That's what I would say. And so I would say the overall market is that conversation we just had. Interest rates are low. Overall, it's shifted from an extreme seller's market. In this price range, honestly, it's kind of a little bit of both. I can't believe that those are all condos. I don't think it's catching. But that it's shifted from a very extreme seller's market to a little bit of a buyer's market, depending on the area and the price range. But overall, that would be like, I would make a couple statements. Then I would say, now the next thing we need to do, because real estate is local, is drive into what's going on in your area with condos and the price range that you're looking in. And this is what the overall situation is. And I would say, but most importantly, is this next sheet. And I would have a one-line CMA from the MLS about what's going on in their neighborhood over the last 12 months. And then I would look to the solds in the neighborhood to talk about, to validate what we're seeing here in the overall market. And so I would look at, so then but before I dove into the neighborhood, I would dive into this and just talk about the seasonality of listings. I would be looking definitely at the trends of that month year over year. So like I'm looking at February this year, we had more listings, but we also had more pendings. And so overall, this is signaling, if we would have been having this conversation 4 weeks ago, it's signaling that the market is even stronger than it was last year, which was also an extreme seller's market. And so I would start talking about why I felt like that was, and then what I felt like moving forward. And then this is where, though, you switch to, all right, what is our competition? And so I would take this conversation, and the next step for me in this market would be, okay, that was the past, but in a shifting market, what I know is that we can't pay very much attention to the past, because what happened in the past was in the past. It was pre-coronavirus, and everybody will understand that. This is so much more of a drastic environment. I mean, 2008 had some of this, but like there was just such a drastic change. So I would say, so now what we need to look at is like actually what's going on. And so the way that we're going to do that is jumping into the MLS. And I wasn't planning on doing this, but since you guys asked, and I think it's really relevant to the conversation, is how do we look at, like, if Trendgraphix hasn't updated, you know, what things look like. So one of the things I've been talking about in my Facebook lives has been what's been going on over the last, for properties that have been listed in the last 7 days. Now, had we not been in such a seller's market, this would probably not be as relevant of a conversation. But because, again, if we go back and look at this, we literally had 8 more pendings than new listings in February. So we were burning through houses, you know, faster. Like if we look at February, I mean, it wasn't down that much, but February of 20 was actually 3 fewer active listings than February of 19, which doesn't sound like that much, except for when you're talking about going to 17 to 14, you know, it's like 20%. So you're having more pendings. You have 9 more pendings, and you have 3 less active properties. You had 7 more new listings, and you still had, 3 less active properties. So we're burning through them. So now let's go look at what happened. So we were in an extreme seller's market. So the reason, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, why this is so important is because obviously properties were selling very quickly. Like if we come down here and we look at the average days on market, this is always a little bit relative depending on what sold, especially in the winter time. But we had a lot of properties, and I don't know if there's a median. There's not a median days on market. So I might have the days on market. Do you guys know what the one line CMA is?
Yeah, I use it a lot.
Okay.
I don't. Well,
okay.
I know what CMA is, but I don't know what the one line CMA is.
Oliver, what neighborhood is your listing in?
Well, it would be considered Mount View area.
Okay. And this wouldn't be the way that I would do a CMA, to be honest with you, but just for purposes of showing you guys what the one line CMA is. So you would look at the area that you're looking, and then you would go to CMA, and then you would click on one line CMA. And then it's going to populate the CMA, which is going to show us some of these great statistics. And the reason I like this for days on market is this is a perfect example. So the average days on market of the sold properties is 38, but the median is 6. And that's because one property was on the market for 189 days. And since there were only 9 of them, it threw the average off completely. So that's why when I'm back here looking at this Trendgraphix report, it's like, man, every time I show a place in Upper Arlington for 300, there's like 17 offers. And this is saying the average days on market is 42. Well, this is the reason why. Is because there was probably 1 or 2 anomalies that really threw the average off. And so you want to look at the median, which was actually only 6.
And you can also cherry pick those stats. I mean, you can go back and choose listings that are more comparable. And then like
you can. And though you have to be careful, because you also, our job, especially in this market, is we want to be honest. And I might say something.
Sorry.
No, you're okay.
No, I just do it for like a certain style of house, right? So like we know in a certain market, maybe a certain style house sells better than another style. So if I'm doing a one line CMA, I'm saying like, here's all the ranch sold houses in this area versus a blend such as this. But this is also very good just as an overall market view too.
You're right. You're exactly right. And you can mince it. However, one thing I would say though, and sometimes you can kind of show your truth through a script a little bit and say something like, some agents might only show you a small sample size. And the reality is that I want to show you this just to show you this is the danger of overpricing a house.
There you go.
This person overpriced their house, or this person on Zollinger, because it's such a busy road, just because it's a seller's market doesn't mean that you can list it for whatever you want, no matter where it is, or have that type of a conversation.
Right.
But anyways, so you're looking at the median days on market here, but the other advantage is that now we're looking at just the neighborhood. So in here now we're talking about there's 1 active property. In this type of a market though, when there's only 1, it makes it hard. You probably want to grow your sample size a little bit, but your job in this type of a market is to make sure, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, our job is to make sure that we're better than this property. Because we have to make sure that the next buyer that comes in to look in Mount View is going to buy our property before this one. And so it completely switches from our conversations before were about how does our property compare to this one that sold 2 months ago, to how does our property compare to the active competition right now? And what do we need to do to make sure that we're the next one that sells? And so what we're going to do though is go and look at, I'm going to take Mount View away as a criteria here. And I'm just going to, so what I did was I went and I selected all the active, contingent, and then pending properties. And then I scrolled all the way down to the bottom, and you have to go to this add a field to the search field and type in list date, or you can type in the word list, and everything that has list will come up in it. And I selected list date, and that's going to populate it here. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to change that to the last 7 days. Or you could even, I mean, if you wanted to look at what's happened in the last 3 weeks, you could type in 21 days back. So out of the last 21 days, this is going to go back and look at every property that had a list date in the last 21 days. And then we're going to go ahead and put in Upper Arlington just to pare this down. And Upper Arlington has some ugly stats for this. And then we're going to go back to the CMA, to the one-line CMA. And what that's going to show us is it's going to show us all the properties that are still active. So it shows us that there's been 33 properties that have been listed in the last 21 days. And then 25 of those are still active. So only 8 of those have gone into contract. Now, what I've been seeing from my numbers that I want to point out, and it's been consistent across the board, is what we see here. And that is, look at what the average price point is of the properties that went into contract, $290, and the average price point of the properties that are still available for sale, $575.
Hold it now. Where did you get that from?
Right here. So these above here are all the active properties.
Yes. Yeah.
And so their average price point has been $575. And then the in contract or
got it. Okay.
properties are an average price point of $290. And that's been consistent in all school districts. And so Upper Arlington, I believe, has been hit harder than everywhere else simply because their average sales price is higher. But it's certainly something, like from conversations I've been having with people, and knowing what I know on our sales team, that definitely like above that 400, 450 range has been a lot of crickets in many cases, unless something was priced really, really well. So does that make sense for you guys?
Yeah.
That was great.
Okay. And so you can go through and do that, you know, like we can, and the cool thing is like what I've been doing for my numbers, and it's easy, is to go through and just look at Olentangy. And you could do this every single week, for example, and then start getting an idea of what's happened. Like I can show you guys on, this will just be bonus, I guess, for you guys. And I should probably just share this somehow, put it in a Google Sheet with the office. I'm grabbing it on my other screen here.
So here's a random stupid question while this is happening. How on those charts can there be more pended and more sold than there are more for sale?
Because those are, because the number that are for sale in that month, like more of them went pending than were left active. So we talked about how I think they could be counted as pending in the same month as sold, but they wouldn't be counted as active. They would be counted as a new listing. But if they weren't still active by the end of the month, they wouldn't be counted as active. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like this is an example though of looking at the entire market. So I've been keeping these stats, and actually I'll run some today and do a Facebook Live. But like last Monday compared to the Monday before, which was the 23rd, So 43% of the entire market went into contract within the first 7 days on the 23rd of March, but then by the 30th of March, 38% went in. So it was a drop of 5%. And then I have it broken down by school districts. By the way, if you guys want listings to sell, go to Hilliard. Look at this. They've always been the best consistently throughout all of these last few weeks. Hilliard Schools has been going into contract. On the 30th, 71% of the properties that listed went into contract in less than 7 days. Like, they crushed it. Part of it, I think, is the average price point in Hilliard, but like compared to Upper Arlington was 13%.
Right.
So very interesting stuff.
Mhm.
So again, with Olentangy, you can do the same thing, pull those numbers. And I mean, I'm less concerned in this for this number and this conversation about the specific properties as I am about just the, getting the overall numbers. So 91 have been listed in the last 21 days in Olentangy schools, and 35 are in contract with an average. So again, very interesting though, right? Only 30% of the market, or a little more than that, 35% went into contract. However, look at the average days on market for the ones that went into contract. So these are all the properties listed in the last 21 days. So the conversation I'm having with the seller is obviously price point based. So 355 was the average for the properties that went into contract, and 475 was the average for the properties that didn't go into contract. So that's conversation number one. But conversation number two is that the median of the places that went into contract was 4 days. So what that's telling you is that the properties that are priced right are still moving very quickly, but the properties that are like, you have a month ago, you had a huge margin for error on price. Now you don't have a huge margin for error. You won't get showings if you're priced too high, or if you're in the higher price range, you might have to talk about a very aggressive price reduction strategy. Otherwise, you're going to end up chasing the market. And so my conversation with somebody in the 500 or 600 range is, this is what we've seen over the last 15 days, right? So let's say we have let's just go look at reality. Let's say we're in Olentangy schools and we want to look at everything that's listed between 450 and 600 over the last 3 weeks. So here's the reality of what's happening in that price range. Like, so let's say you're listing a $500,000 property, is that there have been 19 properties listed and only 5 of them went into contract. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, how painful would it be with COVID-19 going on to have people coming through your house for 19 days from now? And that question, and I would just not own it. This isn't me like owning it. This is me understanding what you're looking for as a seller. How do you feel about that? Mm-hmm. And if you don't feel good about it, then my job is to tell you that realistically, like, this could go on for a couple more months. It most likely is not going to like flip the switch and be just back to normal by May 1st. And so how long are you willing to wait in order to make that money? Or do you not have to sell? Because if you don't have to sell, then we have 2 options. We can either sit on the market at this price, or we have to get really realistic, because I can tell you this is what's going to happen in the higher price ranges. I'm telling you right now. So right now is a sweet spot because we have appraisals, right, for the last 6 months. But as soon as this continues to happen, what's going to happen is that Mary Chris in about a month, her husband is going to get transferred, or she's going to get transferred by her job to San Francisco, and she's going to have to sell her house right now because the only alternative is that her family's split up. And so when Oliver goes in to talk to Mary Chris, Oliver is going to ask her that question, and Mary Chris is going to say, Oliver, I need to do whatever it takes to make sure that during this time where we're, still self-quarantining, even though we don't have to anymore, that I am in San Francisco with my husband or vice versa.
We can see that right now from this chart. Here's what I'm looking at. Look, everything that's active, still, the median price point is not any different than what's in contract. What is different is which is list price to square footage. So they're about 10 square feet or $10 per square foot higher. The ones sitting on the market is $159, and the ones that are in contract $149. But that's a $30,000 difference.
Yeah,
so,
I was gonna say it's insignificant, except for that the average size is 3,100 square feet.
Yeah, so they're almost the same size houses, but they're about 30,000 above what the market's bearing right now. So if you want to get, like, if you're hypothetically like, we need to be priced at where, $149 a square foot, not $149 a square foot.
Yeah. So what's happening is that sellers are having a false sense of security right now, and many agents are, because they're pricing to the solds.
Yep.
But 30 days from now,
Be
those are
different.
going to be the solds.
Mhm.
And the appraisers understand the market. And I can tell you as much, and I'm sure everybody on this call has experienced it, how much of a pain and how much pushback you get from appraisers when you're trying to sell the most expensive house in the neighborhood. Well, I can tell you the very second that there's a least expensive house, the appraiser wants to use it a number one.
Mhm.
And so you're going to have a hard story to sell to the appraiser. And then this is another script that I think is very relevant in this conversation. And that is that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, do you realize we have to sell the house 5 times? Can I explain? Number one, I have to sell it to the agent, because as more and more houses come on the market, like right now, they have 14 to look at. If Mary Chris is getting transferred here and she's starting her job and she wants to get her family, planted in this house before, like, they don't want to have to move twice, they have 14 houses to look at. If she's only here for 1 day, she might only look at 7. So what are we going to do to make sure that, your house is number one? So first I have to sell it to the agent, because Mary Chris doesn't know anything about Olentangy schools. Then I have to sell it to Mary Chris, who's the buyer. Then the next person I have to sell it to is the inspector. And then the fourth person I have to sell it to is the appraiser. The fifth one is one that people always forget about, and that is the underwriter. Guys, right now, lenders are trying to come up with reasons why they don't want to close a loan, because the secondary mortgage market is pushing back, partly because of all the refis, and then partially just because the economy is shaky. And so I can tell you that if you thought it was hard before to get an appraiser or the bank to change an appraisal, it's going to be 100 times harder over the next couple months. And so that underwriter, during the downturn, we would have times where the appraiser would appraise a property and the underwriter would come back to the appraiser and say, we want more proof of this price. And they would push back on it. So that's a conversation that, now moving back to the conversation with the seller, is we have to sell it 5 times. So are you confident, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that even though the average price per square foot is $149 of the ones that sold, that listing your property at $166 per square foot is the right idea? Or actually, I flipped that. If you $175, because I was looking at the median. But those are conversations that you guys definitely need to start having in your listing appointments if you're not already, because if you don't have them now, you're going to be having them later, which is better than never. But we definitely, especially in these higher price points, need to be having conversations about, if we go in at 175, like we need to have a conversation right now that if we're not sold within a week or two, or we haven't had 5 showings or whatever, that we're, what's our next plan going to be? Because what I don't want to do is set the expectation that you're going to have 10 showings and it's going to sell in the first weekend, and then you get 1. And you do want to be in San Francisco with your family, right? So let's do the right thing and price it to sell and get you to San Francisco.
Mhm.
And you can make it up on the buy there. Good.
Good.
Very good.
Good stuff, Troy.
What else? What questions?
I guess what conversation are you having around absorption rates?
It kind of goes hand in hand. So, I mean, again, I think you have to be very sensitive to area and price point right now. I mean, price point's always been important, I think. But certainly this absorption rate is real. I wouldn't go back more than 3 weeks right now when I was talking about absorption rate.
Yeah.
So
Totally
I would
different
talk,
markets. Can't even.
yeah,
Totally different market.
Yeah, you really can't. You really can't. I mean, here probably by next week, you'll start to be able to include the solds in this and have some idea. But honestly, like realistically, the next 2 weeks are going to be really tough emotionally, I think, for people. I mean, we're about to be getting some news of deaths and things like that a lot of us, even though deaths happen, there's more death that happens in general, but when it's shoved down our throat, and somebody that we know dies and everyone's talking about death and sickness for an extended period of time, it's going to be difficult to not have an effect on people's psyche. And I think, and fear causes paralysis. And so I think it's something that you have to have open and honest conversation with your sellers. Now, I do think as agents, we have the opportunity to be leaders to our clients. I think it's our obligation to be leaders to our clients and lean into that fear a little bit and acknowledge that fear. I don't know if you guys watched, I really didn't intend on it being a 16-minute video, but if you don't want to listen to me, listen to that podcast from Craig Groeschel, because it will be so worth your 30 minutes about how to lean into this conversation around leadership. And even if you don't feel like you're leading people, I promise you there are a lot of people that look up to you as a leader. And even if you don't have children, your clients are expecting you to be a leader. Everyone right now is looking for somebody to give them some kind of semblance of like steadiness. And if you're just there for them with factual information and no BS, pardon my language, you will have so much respect from them during this time.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Farming to your postcards to your farm.
Mm-hmm.
What numbers would you put on there right now?
Yeah, I that's a great question. And I haven't seen a ton around postcards, to be honest with you. And it's a fantastic question. I would almost probably change my message to, something around just being there to help. And I think I was kind of shooting off the hip with somebody a couple days ago about this topic. And I think the best thing that I came up with was, we just sold a house around the corner, and the unfortunate reality is that although this is a really tough time, there are people that have to make moves, or that it makes sense. So if you want somebody that's going to give you the facts and listen to your circumstances and give you honest advice, and this is too wordy for a postcard, but this is the idea, on, do you want a straight shooter and somebody who's willing to give you like true advice, then give me a call.
Would you include stats? So like I was taking notes here and I thought that maybe that they would like to see the number of active versus the number that have gone into contract.
You could, however, I think you would have to be careful because I don't know that the numbers tell the story on their own. You know, typically, and you got to think like by the time you create a postcard and mail it, are they even relevant anymore?
This is April. So mine goes out in a week and I've got to work on it this week.
Yeah.
So would I do Marches? I mean, COVID for all of us started like March 13th when we started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could go about it two ways. Obviously, you have some impact, right? And for the second half of March, the other thing that you could do is you could talk about the things, maybe instead of doing specific numbers. Is this for a farm or is this like to your sphere?
It's my farm.
I mean, maybe you do still just list the actives and the solds and say, obviously with COVID, you know, there's been changes in the market, and to find out the latest trends, you know, give me a call or something like that.
Okay.
Because people do still want to know what their neighbor's house sold for and what their neighbor's house is listed for. I mean, that never changes.
Right.
But I would probably also use that as an opportunity to plug your app or whatever, wherever you're sending people to, and just say, for the most up-to-date information, you know, fill out a form or download my app. Because you could also create a Google form or a lead form on your website, you know, through command that would capture and just say, like, if you would like to get a monthly email from me on neighborhood activity, so you can stay up to date, you know, go to teresaKnowsMuirfield.com, because you can go buy that vanity and point it to whatever website. If you need help with that, I can help you with that. And then point it to that form where they can fill it out to receive information about what's going on in Muirfield.
Right. Okay, cool. Thank you. Get my app. Okay. Oh, it sucks. Okay.
Good.
Thanks.
Good. I didn't even see we had a couple late arrivals, Dorian and Katie and Barb. So welcome, guys. Or
Hi.
guy and ladies. Do you guys have any questions?
No, but that was very informative. Glad we had that today.
It was very good. Thank you.
Good. All right, awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and have Angela put this on the YouTube channel too. So if you guys want to look back at it, and certainly if you guys have anything else, you can always reach out.
Cool.
I don't have a question, but I do have a public service announcement. We're still having our blood drive on April 16th. And you can get your clients to sign up, and you can assure them that they will have a private room. They won't be near other people. I've been calling my people with that information. It's kind of been fun. So
that's great.
Where are we having it, Teresa? Sorry.
At our office.
At our office still? Okay.
Yes. So then we're going to use the 3 front conference rooms for people to have private rooms to be in. So it'll be good. So go ahead and sign up. I'm going to repost it on the Facebook page so that people know.
Yeah, Teresa, I was thinking if you want to put some bullet points about what you would like to see in a flyer and email it to Angela, and she could create a Canva around that, I think that would be really valuable for people to be able to send out, and just kind of use the bullet points to talk about the safety and what things we're doing to make sure that there's not exposure. I think that would be super helpful.
Ooh, that's a great idea.
And then don't forget the reason why it's so important is because, you know, that we include that message. And for those of you on the call, the reason is because they do a lot of blood drives. And since no one's together in groups anymore, a lot of those events have been canceled. And that's a huge driver for them.
Well,
So-
people are afraid to go out and give blood. For some reason, giving blood makes you think you're going to get coronavirus, but you're not. You're going to be okay. So I'll get that in the bullet point and I'll send it over to Angela. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Troy.
All right.
Thanks,
Troy.